I have two different topics for you today. Hello. I've updated my thing as well, so it's not as cluttered. The first thing is, I guess, the overarching point of this video is why am I making resonance theory on a deeper level? And there's kind of two answers to that. One being I have potentially the delusion that I can change psychology for the better and change people's understanding of how they work for the better in a significant way in making a lot of this stuff more accessible. And that brings me into my second thing, which is one, a lot of this stuff is not known by the wider public. A lot of really good tools and systems and fundamental understandings of the human mind are understood by psychology already. But it is so siloed in kind of density and technical jargon just by the way that it was discovered and found and built on that it makes it very difficult for people who are getting into it to understand conceptually. And so I think part of the problem is that it kind of went from a bunch of these little pieces of data that we collected from all of these different studies in trying to understand things and fix particular problems, that we start from here and kind of slowly build our way up the pyramid of knowledge and understanding. And so it makes it very granular. And resonance theory is basically starting from the top, starting from the most basic things, and working down into the complexity. And that brings me to one of the other problems, which is I think my thoughts are going to be a little bit scattered for this one. That the system, the DSM and all of the systems are very functional for solving particular problems. That's what it's designed for, is that you have these 7 symptoms that have some overlap with these other symptoms, but because of the fact that they have different solutions, different benefits to solving them, that you need to differentiate between all of these different systems. And that's fine and great, but there's a lot of nuance and complication around the arbitrary thresholds of a lot of these different terms, and a lot of weird ambiguity that you will say that, oh, well, just because it's one minor thing off, then it goes from being full-on problem to not enough of a problem to do anything about. And I think a lot of psychologists are aware of this, and I think it's an understood shortcoming. And I don't think resonance theory solves that. I think it just bypasses the problem of not treating all of these things as fundamentally different bubbles. I think having a lot of different bubbles of things causes a lot of trouble and complications, as opposed to creating a model that basically describes everything, the fundamental mechanics of human behavior, and then watch as you turn the knobs and dials and see how you alter the fundamental equations. You can see all of the deviations and maladaptive behavior coming off of it that create the problems, and it makes it a lot easier to fundamentally understand what the problems are. And it's not that psychologists don't already have those understandings about people, but when you're talking about something really complicated like addiction, or like a mental disorder, or ADHD, or OCD, or bipolar, or any of these things, that those can be really hard to wrap your brain around as a regular person unless you have some better intuitive model for these things, where just describing the technical aspects of it is not sufficient for an understanding. I think those are all of the main psychological arguments that I have for the model, is that it's starting from the top, moving down, and I think it's been really helpful for me for modeling and understanding a lot of these different really complicated topics, and it makes it a lot more intuitive for me. But that's kind of on the professional side. That's why I'm pursuing psychology. And that's why I think it matters, and I keep pursuing it. And I think on the personal level, part of the reason why it's been important for me to describe is getting into what I call pseudo-choice. Pseudo-choice. So the system itself, I haven't really talked about the system itself in this video, but part of the really interesting thing about it is that it's taking all of this different complexity around subjectivity and value and morals and all of these things where there's so much different apples to oranges going on. Apple, orange, going on, that it's just completely nonsensical and abstract, and the constant arguing over, oh my gosh, it's just an opinion, it's just my personal value, it's whatever, that it can be so dragged down in the technicality of subjectivity that you can't have useful conversations around it. And I think that you can. I believe that by viewing subjectivity as an advanced version of single-celled organisms moving towards and away certain chemicals that they have evolved to move towards and away from, that you can understand this fundamental idea that we are doing value calculus in our heads intuitively basically all the time. And this is how we move and grow and all of these different things. And so, not that it is an objective system, but it is the perceived value of any particular action or behavior or outcome or thought process. And so the reason I started working on this system was I was really struggling with the fact that I didn't seem to be able to make choices for myself, because my mind and my body had already decided what optimal choices were. And maybe that's a cop-out. I still am not sure. But what I was noticing was that there are certain things, let me draw my graph. There were certain things that would just become so negative that the pseudo-choice, so pseudo-choice basically is that one outcome, like if you're deciding between two identical jobs, but this one pays $20 an hour and this one pays $10 an hour, it is technically a choice which one you pick over which other one, if they're identical in every other way. But the choice is kind of made for you, and with the model of resonance theory, suggesting that you're doing it based off of the biases of your system, is unless you gain new information or new understanding, that there is an obvious path for you to take until you add other things, that the weight is so weighted in one direction that you have to add a bunch of shit to this side to make it akin to an actual regular choice. And so I become so overwhelmed with certain emotional stimuli that the only viable path, it seems to me in the moment, is to do external things to correct it. And this would be considered poor internal emotional regulation, would be the I think would be the correct technical term for it, where I'm not able to adjust all of the negative signal from inside of me. So there's basically all of the signals coming from inside my brain, and then there's all of the signals coming from the outside world. and you can basically act in the inside and outside world. And nothing, this is an oversimplification, this is the emotional truth I have. I have a very hard time dealing with this highly negative signal by altering things internally. I have poor control over it. And so what I do is I alter my external environment in order to avoid this negative stimuli that is so incredibly strong that it basically overwrites everything else. So if I am having a strong disagreement or something about some other person is like really irking me and like really giving me a bunch of negative signals, I have not yet developed the coping mechanisms or systems or reframing processes to adjust internally so that I don't have to change the external behavior and get rid of this signal or to tolerate this signal. I have to do the single-celled amoeba thing and move away from the negative stimuli. And that has a lot of negative consequences on my life. The fact that I need to deal with my emotional regulation externally. That's not great. And I had a really hard time understanding all of that and articulating all of that. And feeling like I wasn't in control because it felt like the path was kind of already predetermined for me because of this pseudo choice, because of what was that term? I just learned it today. Basically that emotions trigger actions. And when you have it's kind of something that is very common in things like OCD, where if you have an emotion and it triggers an action, which triggers you feeling better, then next time you have the emotion, then you're having a stronger reinforced behavior for the counter reaction. And so you start to lose control because that seems like the only thing you're able to do. And I think that's the main thing I wanted to say. It's not the way that I wanted to say it. It was probably over-wordied and probably didn't make that much sense. But that was the thing I really wanted to record before I went to bed. It's been a weird day. But thanks for watching, and I hope you have a good day.